Give me a definition of sport. What is sport? Physical activity combined with like pleasure, entertainment, yeah? Okay? And it's important for us to define these terms because actually we will be doing a disservice to the noble stature of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu if we associated him sallallahu with the modern concept of sport. Here's the Oxford definition: an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. That is not befitting the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's important that we understand that when we associate this sport element with the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we are not associating modern definitions upon him. Here is one that's probably more appropriate, given by Shaykh Jibreel Fuad Haddad, Hafizullah Ta'ala. He's a scholar from actually originally from Lebanon, studied in Damascus for many years, Muhaddith. He writes, it is right to say that the Prophet ﷺ was the apex of futuwa, a word that is both nobler and more inclusive of moral qualities than the Arabic term riyada, sport, which denotes four meanings: youth, virility, bravery, generosity. Among the ideals subsumed in these four is the modern concept of sportsmanship. Manana mentioned earlier on that actually our competitiveness actually lay in this concept we have in Islam, ithar, preferring others over oneself. Sheikh Dawood Walid, you must really take to him. He's written some very great books. In the land of Africa, it's a must. It's a crime if you don't read his books. He's written a really interesting book that I had to consult. I actually spoke to him on several occasions because of the narrations. Again, contextualizing modernity. When you read about black Sahaba, slaves, there's a modern connotation, a slighting, a racial connotation that we have to sadly contextualize. He wrote a really interesting book here, Blackness in Islam. He wrote several books of this kind, very interesting book. And the other book that I think is very, it's a must read for all you guys, especially here, Deen team, Futuwa, and the raising of males into sacred manhood. So just a quick plug of our Sheikh's book. He actually mentioned in a definition, in essence, this concept Futuwa, that the Prophet ﷺ is the apex of, the great example of, is the outward exemplification of an inward code of honor. Let that simmer for a while and let you think about that, because when you step into the masjid, when you come here, when you go to the Deen team retreats, I hope and I pray that your intentions are refined and renewed each time, that we're always looking to the Prophet ﷺ for our best example, and that we're drawing close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we're not, that activity is batil. That activity that we're doing, even if it be archery, if you're coming there just to outdo Muhammad or Ahmed or Fatima or Aisha, beat you, and that's the only reason you're doing it, there's a failure in your approaching the arts of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a quick plug of the book. I just want to highlight something because I really wish, inshallah, that you open this up to our sisters when we release the book. I teach in a retreat called Futuwa. It's an annual retreat in Turkey, and last retreat was in 2019. There were more sisters that attended it than brothers, which is good and bad. Good to see the encouragement. Actually, I have a chapter in here on the female warriors amongst the Sahabiyat, the female warriors amongst the companions. And I really feel passionate about this because our sisters, I'm talking from our context, in the Western context, are leaving Islam left and right. Yeah? They're not being included in any discussion in any way. They're not empowered. So it's really important for us to understand that. There's a section on that. There's another section on the objectives of sport in Islam. A really important point that your Sheikh Siraj Hendricks in Cape Town, he highlighted 20 years ago, 5 major points, which inshallah will be talked about in the book as well. The last section of the book is a translation, not by myself. I attempted it. It was a very good translation. It was actually done by Mufti Muhammad Aman Haq, and it was refined by Maulana Muhammad Qazi Hussain. These are all ulama that I consulted of Imam al-Suyuti's Al-Musara al-Musara'a. It's a book that we translated as hastening or swiftly to wrestling. That there are 18 hadith, athar of the Rasulullah ﷺ and his Sahaba and how they would engage the arts. My job was there to give a very short, very basic grappler's commentary. It's not a commentary in the linguistic sense or anything of the sort. It's more, if you were to give this book to your sister who knows nothing about grappling, how would they interpret and understand that the Prophet ﷺ took down Sayyidina Rukana radiallahu anh 3 times? How would you contextualize that? How could you make a non-martial artist, a non-physical person understand the import, the greatness of the Rasulullah ﷺ and what he did physically if you're not a physical person? Sayyidina Rukana radiallahu anh, we say radiallahu anh because he was Sahaba. He was a man who was only physical in nature, and that the da'wah for him was not in words, was not in actions, in your tijara, in your transactions. It wasn't even the word of Allah. It was physical for him. That if you could defeat me, if you could take me down, I'm ready to listen. And this is why it was important for us to understand that. So that's just some there. In it is also some, we'll come on to this, some endorsements by Shuyukh and Prince Ghazi bin Muhammad, Hafizullah, is a Shaykh from Jordan, Ahl al-Bayt, mashallah. He actually wrote a very interesting book, The Origins of Sport and Culture. He's talking about, again, from an Islamic perspective. Again, I quoted some of his book in here. Sheikh Yusuf bin Maf, I just met him 3 days ago, mashallah, Hafizullah, Allah protect and preserve him in PE. What's PE now? PE is not PE. Port Elizabeth, it's called something else now. That's it, mashallah. I love it. And other shuyukh. We also had sportsmen. So the likes of Mario Sukata, we talked about UFC. Mario Sukata, very quick, interesting side note. Mario Sukata is a prolific jiu-jitsu grappler. He is the former trainer of Quinton Rampage Jackson, if you know who he is. If you know Michael Bisping, and your hands up if you know Michael Bisping. Hands up. One person knows Michael Bisping. Okay. That's a good sign. A few of you. Don't be shy. He's a very formidable UFC fighter, held a record at one point for the longest winning streak. So Mario Sukata taught them grappling. He was their jiu-jitsu coach. I was asked to go to Liverpool, which is 5 hours from where I live, in London, to teach grappling to a Muslim institution there. I was exhausting myself, and my Sheikh Ibrahim Osiefa, again, Allah preserve him, he was really the impetus behind a lot of what you're reading. He said, look, why don't you just move here? I said, I can't move here. I said, you've got someone here already. He said, who? I said, Mario Sukata, former UFC veteran. He came to the institute. Not only was he teaching the Muslims grappling, he himself was learning Islam. Over 3 months, he said, what is this you're doing? The bowing and he goes, this is our salah. He came in the month of Ramadan. What do you mean you sunset and you're eating now? Oh, this is siyam, this is fasting. 3 months, he took his shahada. He's famous. He's a Muslim. Mario Sukata, he's a Muslim. So these are the guys that read the book and gave a few endorsements. Alhamdulillah, I had the honor of writing a small article. I really recommend people just read it. Just inshallah, it's a free article. You can go into here if you scan that PDF code, or go to the Muslim 500. It's an annual publication of the most influential Muslims in the world. This year, they actually for the first time introduced Olympians, Muslim Olympians. And this was really interesting because for the first time ever, not only were Muslim Olympians mentioned, but they were prolific in number. Of all the nations that competed and those that medaled, Muslim nations that you would identify as Muslim nations, the 67% of them medaled, and they were all in the martial arts. Can anyone name the martial arts that are found in the Olympics? Quickly. Shout them out if you know them. Cricket's not in there, by the way. Sorry? Freestyle wrestling is another style of wrestling as well. Greco-Roman, yeah. Another style of grappling begins with J. Judo, good. Sambo's not in the Olympics. T begins with T. Taekwondo. What did the Rasulullah ﷺ, what were they known for? So fencing, 67% of them medals, Muslim, in the martial arts. Interesting for us to understand. This is the Futuwa retreat that we have Annually, this year it will take place again in Afyon. It's a 5-star resort. You have Sheikh Ibrahim al-Siyafa. Who knows who did the khat of the Medina Mus'haf? Who did the calligraphy of the Medina Mus'haf? Does anyone know the name of the Sheikh? He's from Medina. Sheikh Usman Taha, you should read. He is a contemporary of Sheikh Deen. Sheikh Deen teaches us calligraphy on this retreat. Their peers, Sheikh Usman Taha. We have Ustad Jihad Shamis, who I know you're familiar with. He teaches the archery. And mashallah, Yusuf Bimath, he teaches us the horse riding. So it's a wonderful, all-encompassing retreat at a beautiful resort in Turkey. Inshallah, if you have the opportunity and the means, please try and come to that. What is grappling? Is the concept. So many of us understand this if you're grapplers, many of us don't. But it's basically this concept, Sara'a, to wrestle, has two primary definitions. One is to actually take part in a fight. Again, we're using a hands wheel for this definition. Maybe the ulama here can correct me. But it's actually to grapple, to tussle with one's opponent, to either try and force them down to the ground or throw them. It's also a synonym for mujahada, to struggle with something. It has that same connotation. So we should understand that as well. Wrestling is a subset of the genre of grappling. Grappling has many rules. So if you go, I went to Sudan, alhamdulillah, I saw a type of grappling there. I went to Japan, I saw a type of grappling there. I went to Brazil, I saw a type of grappling there. The definitions or the distinctions between them are based on their rules. What are you trying to establish or do when you grapple somebody in a given context? For us to understand at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that actually, from what we can read from the accounts, and this is several interpretations, my reading and my speaking with shuyukh, is that it was amalgamation actually of two primary stand-up forms of wrestling. Greco-Roman, again, bit of a Eurocentric definition. I don't like the fact that it's Greco-Roman. It could be, Sudani Roman, Sudani wrestling. It could be Afriki wrestling. It could be, because actually when I spoke to a sheikh he was an Iranian master of antiquity. He knows the martial arts even before Islam. He says there's a discussion of where wrestling or grappling came into Arabia. Either the north, from Persia, Fars, or from the south, Nubia. That actually, and he believes it to be actually Nubian of origin, that they were taught how to wrestle. And Imam Suyuti's narrations kind of corroborate that, they kind of confirm that a little bit. So you should understand that there are different rules, different objectives, different forms. There's a person, he's an Irish scholar, he collected 73 different forms around the world of grappling. He went to a lot of places, and you can see he's got a map of it. You can go to his website and buy his map of all the different types of grappling forms around the world. One place he's left out is the Arabian Peninsula. So inshallah, maybe he could read the book and enlighten himself. Arguably the oldest martial art known to man. And you know this. Month of Ramadan is coming up. Taraweeh, after the first 4 rakahs, you just go to any masjid in any part of the world and you go to the back of that masjid. What do you find the young boys doing? It's innate. It's something that's very innate to man, innate to children. And there's evidence of it 3000 BC. It's the first social exercise. When you think of physical fitness, CrossFit, strength and conditioning, what was the first exercise? Running. Many of the scholars talk about running, and I take this from Habib Kazim. He's a Hafizullah. He's a scholar from Dar al-Mustafa. He wrote the foreword to this book, and he said that actually the Sahaba were known. This is his narration. They were known in Baqi' to do rock lifting. We do rock climbing here in Table Mountain. Rock lifting was the Sahaba to strengthen their body, squatting with rocks. So he mentions that was done at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But wrestling is the first social activity exercise, because you need somebody else to do it with you. Yeah? And like Maulana mentioned, you should understand that it was a popular pastime for all children of Arabia. There's a really interesting book by Hugh Kennedy. He's an English scholar. He teaches at SOAS University. He's an Arabist. He reads Arabic very, very well. He wrote on the conquest of the Muslim armies. He writes that actually, with very few exceptions, all the men at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, with a few exceptions, all men were fighters. considered fighters. There was no formal military, there was no policing, that if someone came and took your tent, or took your pail of water, or took your herd of sheep, what would you do to defend yourself? You had to be physically endowed. All of the men around the Messenger of Allah ﷺ were very, very physical. The great, or the so-called great Alexander, the conqueror, he came to the sands of Arabia, conquering many parts of the world, and he failed to conquer Arabia. Why? He came there, the desert, he said, this is a hardy terrain, with a hardy climate, full of hardy people. So once the weapons would fall by the wayside, you had the sword, you had the bow, you had your arrow, you had even the javelin, the spear, and they would grapple. This is documented. Grapple to the ground. And as we read, Imam Suyuti brings it, that the Rasul of Allah ﷺ, he would use grappling as a gauge for military participation. For you to be eligible, you don't write the metric exam. you grapple. They were there. You're going to battle. Hands up those of you who've been in a fight. A real fight. I'm talking not in the masjid, not with your brother. A real fight. Where you have to defend yourself, your heart. How did you feel, Sheikh? How was it? Honestly, how was it? How did you feel? Tell me how you felt inside. Is it a nice feeling? Is it pleasant? Are you like in the movies and I'm ready to go? You're like this. Mouth is dry. Stomach is rumbling. Legs are like jelly. You want to run. You want to go home. This is the reality of combat. And make no mistake about it, that the Rasulullah ﷺ was the bravest of all men. We read just before we came here, Qadi Iyad in his Shifa, and he takes the narrations from Muslim and other sources, that the Sahaba, when they were there in the battle, that when the battle was at its peak, where would they hide? Where would they cower? Where would they go to for security? None other than behind the Rasulullah ﷺ, for he was the bravest on that day. They're talking about Badr. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anh, he said he was the bravest one we saw. And this is war, battle. I come from a place where we don't have guns, and like Monday, I don't know what's going to happen on Monday, Sunday, Monday, you guys have this, lockdown situation. I was told to book my tickets early back, because, here, other things come out. But in the UK, we always have to deal with this. And this is where my background came from, that if you're outside the chip shop, and you're there with your wife and children, and it kicks off, and there's no one around you, what are you able to do? It's imperative. It's a must for us to understand, which inshallah will lead us on to the objectives of sport in Islam. Why you would do it. I'm not trying to scaremonger you. You know better than I. You are in South Africa. You know the realities of what's out there, but you must be prepared yourself. We're not saying that you become vigilantes, hooligans. Astaghfirullah, this is not our way. But push come to shove, we know what we are capable of, and we are always ready, combat ready, inshallah. Again, I'm just going to quickly rattle through this, that there were martial warriors amongst the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, Allah be pleased with them all, jami'an. Specific mention of wrestling, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Ali, Hamza, Khalid bin Walid. He's mentioned West Point. There's a book, Christian Keller. He writes about Sayyidina Khalid, radiallahu anhu, about his military strategy, but also his prowess, that he led from the front, that the Rasulullah ﷺ. It's not like, we give lip service, and I'm speaking to myself, oh, go and do this, and you should be doing that, and why don't you start this in the masjid, but are we doing it ourselves? Sayyidina Khalid was not only known for his strategy in war, but he himself was a warrior. And Christian Keller, you can see it in the book, is mentioned, he writes a whole book on what the US Army learned from Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, radiallahu anhu. Sayyidina Hassan, Hussein, Allah be pleased with them both, the grandchildren of the Prophet ﷺ. Imam Suyuti brings the narration. It's lovely that my children are not here, but I love that my youngsters are here and they're grappling. He brings it there, where they're grappling, and the Prophet ﷺ is watching them, encouraging Hassan. Hassan, he's saying in Arabic, oh Hassan. And Sayyidina Fatima, she gets upset, like, you're encouraging him, what about Hussein? And the narration says that Jibreel, Rasulullah says that Jibreel is saying he's vying for Hussein. This is in our Deen. There is a book on roughhousing. There is this concept of treating children who, as they are born without parents, who are orphaned, who are struggling, who may have not had the maternal, paternal love, affection when they were young children, and this is very prevalent here. I was crying nearly every day when I see the state of the people in South Africa. The townships you go to, it's hard to see the reality here. And you're here, and sometimes we become a little desensitized to it, but that reality is there. And it's something that you should understand about where we live and who we are, the people that we're trying to serve. That there's this concept of roughhousing. That children who are neglected, they lose out in life because they don't have this tactile touch. And actually, the art of roughhousing is for children to wrestle with them. There's a whole book on it. What is the Rasulullah telling us to do? What is he encouraging us to do? With our children, to play with them, to encourage them, physically touch them. Very, very important. Sahabiyat, the names are there. And I mentioned Umayr bint Qais, anha, because it was really important for me. I gave a talk in a masjid, and it was a very, very manly masjid. That the sisters had a little toilet to sit in. That was their, sister section. And I feel very upset about that because Umayr bint Qais, Allah be pleased with her, at the age of around 13, she came, and I believe, I may be mistaken on what ghazwa it was. I'm not sure which one it was. Maybe Khandaq, I'm not sure. But she comes, Ibn Sa'ad bin Tabaqat, that she came, 13 years old, and she came to Rasulullah and said, Ya Rasulullah, I want to help you. I want to help you. 13-year-old girl, they're going for ghazwa, they're there, armaments are ready, few horses, camels, swords, men. And what did he say to her? He said, you want to help? Come along. He takes her on the back of the camel, his horse, on the mule. They alight at one spot, they stop there for water, for break, for salah. She holds on to the horse, embarrassed. There's blood running down the side of the horse. She has her first menstrual cycle, embarrassed. What does the Rasulullah do? He comes to her gently, beautifully, mercifully. He says, take this water with some salt. Go to a private place. Cleanse yourself and come back. After the ghazwa, he takes a necklace. He puts it with his own hands on her head. She makes a wasiyah that when I die, I am buried with this necklace that the Rasulullah gave me with his own blessed hands. And then you wash my body with the salt and water as he prescribed. This is for our sisters, that the likes of Nusayr bin Ka'b, swords on Uhud. The Prophet ﷺ saying, she defended me left and right. What an honor. Sayyidina Khawla bin Azwar, Sayyidina Khalid had mistaken her for one of his men. She was there fighting. You can read it in Futuh Sham. And there were very specific people, Sahaba, elite, bossmen. I call them bossmen because they were the bosses. They were the people that were appointed specifically. Yesterday we were driving through from Durban to here, and there was guys coming outside the Shell petrol station. Some, I don't know, rapper or somebody would walk in, and he had armed guards here. The guys were walking in. He got his KFC and he walked back out. And my sons were looking, why does he need bodyguards? I said, there's some people here who think they're important. There were bodyguards. Sayyid Nas, rahimahullah ta'ala, he wrote a book, Nurul Uyun. It's a very nice short work on the seerah of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he brings in there specific Sahaba that were appointed as bodyguards of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam before the Wahi came, where he didn't need protection. You know that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there were people, you have dignitaries, kings, princes, you have these joker celebrities that come through and they go entourage and celebrity. We had Khabib. He came to UK. 7 bodyguards. One of my students was there. Khabib don't need a bodyguard. But these are the men around the Messenger of Allah sallallahu endowed with martial prowess. Every single one of them martial artists. They knew how to use a bow, knew how to use a sword, fence, grappling. That was a given. Sayyidina Hamza, Zul Khaneh. You go to Iran, they have these. Okay, their aqidah is whatever it is, but they have Zul Khaneh, Hamziyah. they have these wrestling houses after Sayyidina Hamza, the uncle of Rasulullah, because he was one of the greatest grapplers of Arabia. Sayyidina Uqasha, you know the narrations, when he had Al-Aun, you know the sword, he was there, his sword broke, and he went to the Rasulullah and he gave him a wooden club, and as he changed hands, zoop, turned into a sword that he kept on his person for battles. This is the mu'jiza of the Rasulullah. Beautiful. These are the people. Sayyidina Zubair, the cousin of the Rasulullah, his mother mentions this. Sayyidina Safiya, that when he was a young boy, he had a bit of a dispute with one of the men in the market, and he threw him. He had a fight with a guy, I think he was 17 years old, threw the old man on the floor, he beat up the man. Not an old man, he was a man, he was 17. And Sayyidina Safiya picked him up, picked the old man, and she dusted him off, and she said, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "How did you find my son? Was he soft as cheese or full of brass?" This is Ibn Sa'd's narration. So I have a lot more to say, but I'll end it there because time is short. Barakallah fikum, Jazakallah khairan. I really appreciate your time. I have quite a few other slides. If you want to know the answer to that question that's on the board, I'll answer that maybe in our own discussions. But I want to end it here with just a note of thanks. I want to thank you all for your indulgence listening. I hope inshallah you purchase the book and enjoy it, and you pray for me and my family inshallah, and Allah accept all your khidmah and all that you're doing here. Barakallahu feekum. So sallallahu alayhi wa Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.